Welcome back to the 78th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring at The Real Biomechanic on Instagram. You can find him. Jay is a good friend of mine, someone who I wanted to bring on the podcast to share his energy, his enthusiasm for both mind, body, and soul health and wellness. I think it's so important. This is a great episode. Jay's passion is absolutely incredible. I'm so excited for you guys to watch the 79th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Here we go. Let's just dive into it. Let's start talking about you as an athlete first before we dive into kind of what you do now from an athletic mind, body, soul standpoint. We'll get into your podcast and what you got planned for that in the future. A lot to talk about here, but let's start off. Who is Jay Farhatton? How did you come to be this incredible individual that you are now?
First of all, thanks for saying that. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
100%.
So man, in high school, I was actually known as Jim. That was my name in high school. I've lived by like 4 or 5 different names, which I find funny. But every time I kind of change who I am as a person, my name kind of went with me. I don't know how that worked, but when I was in high school, I really liked playing basketball. That was my mental health kind of fix. I just loved it. I loved every part of it. And then when I got to high school, I ended up playing football just because that was what the popular guys were doing. I ended up being really good at it, even though I never watched football or anything like that. But I ended up playing football because my buddy wanted to do it, so I joined him anyways. I was going to play volleyball, but I chose not to because the seasons are the same, right? Volleyball and football. So I chose football, and I did 2 sports. Did really well, and ended up going somewhere actually in football. I actually ended up getting scouted by McMaster and going to McMaster for football. However, once I was in training camp, I had a really bad hamstring injury, which timing sake, right? I mean, you get injured in training camp, you're going to need like at least 4 or 5 months just to heal, and that's the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even be able to show. Wasn't even able to show my talents. I wasn't even able to show anything at that next level, and that's what I was like training my whole life to get to. So it was kind of like a hero to zero within a month type of kind of scenario. So that really threw me off. That really set me into a different path, especially because I was living in McMaster, living in Hamilton by myself for the first time. And if anybody that has ever done that, it's devastating for a young person.
Mm-hmm.
Back then we didn't have as much internet as like we do now, and as much resources as we do now. So to ask for help from people like my family members or anything, nobody understood what mental health was even back then,
Mm-hmm.
right? It wasn't really a discussion, right? So I went on this path of discovering how I wanted to go about life and who I was outside of being an athlete. If I'm not going to play sports or be a basketball player or be a football player, then who am I? And then once you try that, then dive into that thing, you understand like, okay, well, who am I? Then what am I? Like, where am I? And you start diving into all these deeper questions. And I just wanted to be an athlete because I wanted to have a bigger impact on the world. I wanted to have a voice so I can actually make different changes in our communities and stuff like that. But now that I didn't have that platform, I'm like, how am I going to create a platform like the NFL or the NBA or any of these high level platforms to make massive changes in my communities? How am I going to do that now? So I felt kind of hopeless. I felt obviously depressed, obviously, right? So then you get into other things, you get into stuff that kind of sedate you or make you feel better about yourself. But honestly, any athlete that's ever been injured knows what I'm talking about because it's like devastating. It's like
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was like a part of me died,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I believe like the Jimmy, I don't even identify with that name anymore because that person literally died. Like I felt like that ego, that identity died. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to come up with something new. And at the time, it was like, okay, fine, I'm going to be known as Jim from now on because it was more professional, I guess, or James or whatever, right? So I was like, okay, Jim. And then I went by that for a while. And then, then I went to work at Good Life because I wanted to be a trainer. Because I'm like, no, I'm not going to leave my passion. I tried all these other jobs. I was a DJ. I was like a renovator. I did all these other things, but it brought me back to the body. And I was obsessed with learning about the body, learning how to like make biomechanical changes in people. And I was obsessed with the idea that I can actually make effective change on people.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, they asked me like, "What do you want to be named as?" I was like, "Well, my real name is Jamil. Like that's my home name. That's what my parents call me, Jamil. It's an
Mm-hmm.
Arabic name, right?" So I was like, "Okay, well, just put the letter J from now on, or for now, and then I'll let you know what I want to go by because it was like a last second thing." So I was like, "Okay, just put the letter J." My name tag literally said J on it, just the letter. So I was just going by J for a long time, and I was like, "Okay, I guess I can't just be one letter, so just put Jay." And I go by that. Legally, I'm Jamie though. Wrap your head around all that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Well, let's like peel back the onion a bit here because I think you touched on a really good point, and that's what athletes go through. Now, whether that's an injury, for instance, like what you went through, whether that's at the end of their career, as they age out, their bodies start to deteriorate. Every athlete goes through that at some point throughout their life. And it
Right.
can be extremely difficult. And to your point, mental health wasn't necessarily a conversation 10, 15, 20 years ago. Whereas now, it's on the forefront. People are aware of it to some degree. I think it's a conversation that's being had, but still, we're still finding out more and more details about how to really dive into what is necessary to overcome some of those struggles, because that is what you identify by. For you, basketball was your thing, football was your sport. You lived, eat, sleep, breathe football, basketball, sports in general. And
Yep.
then to have that taken away from you is devastating. So what were maybe some of those coping mechanisms that you used now to get over that? Because I think that's important. One of the things we're trying to do with the Athletes Podcast is educate the next generation of athletes. You're not the stereotypical professional athlete that we have on, but I wanted to bring you on because of, number one, the energy that you provide is infectious, but number two, you know so much about the body and how it works, and you come at it from a very reasonable, sensible, and logical approach, which I think is so important nowadays. Having a sustainable lifestyle that you can perform at from age 20 to 40 to 60 to 80. So many people right now are caught up in, what's the quick fix? We're going through COVID. People have probably put on the COVID-15 LBs, right?
Yeah, of
And
course.
in this case, it's like people are looking for that quick fix to get them back, when in reality, they need to be doing things that are going to be sustainable long term so that they can live that lifestyle for the rest of their life. What are some of the approaches and techniques that you provide to people with the work that you're doing now?
Wow. Okay. So that could be a loaded question because I have a lot I can go off about all of that. First thing I want to say before I kind of like dive into what I'm doing now is like, when I used to play basketball, man, I was playing basketball because it was my escape from family and from drama and from things that I didn't want to deal with. So
Mm,
basketball was something I did before I even knew that I wanted to play basketball or do anything with it in terms of like the real world or making money from it or monetizing anything. So I wanted to like literally, that was my like mental health escape. So when
mm-hmm,
I went to high school and I started playing basketball and then coaches started taking on and like telling me how to play a certain sport, I was like, okay, well, this is all fine and dandy, but like, regardless of whether I play high school or pro, I'm like, I still use basketball as my therapy. Even
mm,
now, like during this COVID stuff, I'm out there on the courts just shooting hoops. It's just when I hear that sound go in, just like any hockey player, just soccer player, when you see that ball go in the net, it's a meditation. And it
mm-hmm,
was my
totally.
meditation, and that's how I got. If it wasn't for sports for me, I don't even know where I'd be. It taught me
Mm,
leadership. It taught me how to like be play as a team. It taught me how to listen to advice and then execute it, hard work, and then realizing how much work you have to put into anything, any dream you do. But I just want to say that first because like
right.
I still am the basketball player, regardless of what society tells me I failed at or didn't do good at. And that's a huge point in my opinion, because I just think that's important. But
Yeah.
going on to your question, but like what were my coping mechanisms? Like at the time it was like video games.
Mm-hmm,
I because I couldn't move, right? I couldn't go play any sports, so I had to sit home and like play sports. And you get into substances, and you start doing things with those video games, and then all of a sudden I started doing caffeine for the first time. And when I was 19 years old, I never even drank before, so I started drinking a little bit more. So then you start getting into these habits because they kind of mediate or almost substitute for the actual high that you got from the sport.
mm-hmm,
And when you take away that high, it's like, okay, I realized that dopamine release, that serotonin stuff that's happening in your brain when you're playing sports was so addictive, because I believe it brings you into the moment. And when you have that sport or whatever you do, it brings you into the moment, whether it's golf, whether it's hockey, whether it's whatever, you cannot think about anything else,
mm-hmm.
right? That's why I got into like mountain climbing. I got into like rock climbing, extreme sports stuff like that, because I was just like, what else can just take my mind away from the stresses of life? Right?
Mm,
And that's what I believe every athlete. That's why we're so good. The ones that have the most pain sometimes tend to be some of the best athletes I've ever met.
yeah.
You see Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson came from the slums of where he came from, but yet he used that aggression, he used that anger, and it propelled him. Right? We have
Mm-hmm.
so many different examples of that where you come from nothing, and then you like those people end up becoming savages when it comes to sports.
Hmm.
right? So there's a level of savagery that I had to develop as a result of like being put down. Because every time you play sports, you love the idea that people are cheering you on, and that's why we play is like to getting recognition, to getting love from people.
Hmm.
Essentially, you know what I mean? That's all really what an athlete really wants is like they want to be loved, they want to be appreciated, they want to be respected, they want to be seen, they want to be heard. And some people take it and use it in their own way, but I've used it in a way where it kind of makes me stronger as a person. And now I take all those principles and I'm using them to move forward. I'm not
Yeah,
sure if that
Amir,
answers the
you
question, but
100% it does, and I think this is why I was excited to be able to chat with you today, man, because you bring just a fresh, unique perspective that is understanding of where people come from. Because there are 7.8 billion people on this planet, and the fact that one person tells you that you can't do something because you are shorter or because you may not have the physical stature of a 6'3" stereotypical basketball player doesn't mean that you can't play basketball.
we're seeing that now with like Trey Young, Steph
Hmm.
Curry changing the game. Bro, if I
Hmm.
had like my favorite player growing up was Allen Iverson because of his height. And
Mm.
because of his raw dog, 6'1", I was 6'1" in like grade 9. I'm like, oh, if he could do it, I could do it. Like that's how I looked at every sport. That's how I look at now because of that mentality. I see that in careers. I see that in jobs. I see that in everything. It's like if that person can do it, why can't I do it? That's what
100%.
sports. That's what sports taught me, and hard work. And like, man, you got to put in the time, man.
Yeah, that's what's crazy right now is the fact that, with COVID, everything going on, kids don't have sport. Kids don't have that outlet, that release, the
Yeah.
ability to go out, run around, play with other kids, socialize. And to that point, they're missing out so much on what sport teaches. And it's such a shame. It pains me. I mean, I feel for everyone who's going through stuff right now. And it's a shame the way that things are being handled in some places, but we won't go into politics. We'll keep it on sports.
That's
And
another podcast.
yeah, yeah, but it is important to note that it is so important. I mean, Rob McLeod's a guy who we had on about 10, 15 episodes ago. He's the Guinness World Record for Frisbee, does a bunch of work within schools, education, similar to what you're trying to do. But he preaches the EQ and the emotional intelligence that comes along with sport. Incredible what he's doing. I highly recommend people checking out what he is about. But you're doing something similar, or trying to do something similar within the Niagara region and Ontario at a larger scale,
Yeah.
educating kids on physical literacy. Can you dive into a bit about what that is, what your goal
Oh,
is with that, and kind of how we can maybe spur that topic?
definitely. That to me is something that I'm like, I've turned my life into more whys than whats. Now I have
Mm,
my whys, and it helps me get up in the morning knowing that I'm going to make a positive change in my community. Because if somebody like me was like around when I was younger, I would have loved that guy.
yeah.
I would have loved that person is coming back and giving back to my high school, helping and learning all these things that in life, but then giving it back. And that's what a lot
Mm,
of athletes, I believe, is so important, that we have such power. We all have such power. Every athlete that's ever played any sports, like I have a fiance that never played sports. And I'm like, she literally missed out on so many evolutionary things within herself that she could have
yeah.
learned through teammates, through sport, through all these things. And I'm like, oh, now she's learning them through me. And I'm like, ah. So what I'm doing right now is I went to Wesleyan Secondary School in Niagara Falls,
Hmm.
and I really know the that kind of he was really involved with everything. His name is Sean Hilliker, and a
Hmm.
great guy. He's always been trying to bring in new people, bring in new voices. He brought in Mihai from the basketball camp that's here in the area. He does like camps with the youth and everything.
Okay.
But what I'm doing with this is like my goal is 100% to change phys ed programs and to change the outlook of how we teach kids physical literacy.
Hmm.
We have to change that. If I knew about ankle rolls and why an ankle rolls in the first place, if I knew that stuff back in the day, trust me, I would have been doing it every single day to stop myself from rolling my ankle, or at least knowing why it's doing that. So I can
Hmm.
maybe address the shoes I was wearing, maybe address whatever it is. Like, you can make those changes if you have that knowledge, right? Because knowledge is
Hmm.
power. But if you don't have the knowledge, you feel powerless to change. So you have to go and depend on a therapist or a this or a coach or a this. And I don't want to do that anymore. I want to give people the tools to actually make effective change in their lives. And I believe we have to do it at a young age. And if I
Hmm.
can't do it to the youth, then I will do it to the phys ed teachers or the directors of the phys ed programs, whatever it has to take, Like I'm going to bring at least 10 foam rollers to every high school, whether I have to pay for it out of pocket or whether I get crowdfunding or whatever it takes. Like that's my new thing. Like I'm just going to do it. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? And I have the okay from so many different high schools that want to do that, but it has to
Hmm.
come from people that genuinely want to do it, that aren't trying to profit in the same
Right.
way,
Yeah.
right? Like a genuine approach, right?
Absolutely, and I think it's so important. And this is kind of, it's interesting where there are so many parallels between us, because I'm of the opinion that the youth need to be educated as well. I mean, part of the reason why I started the Athletes Podcast is because I wish I had this information when I was growing up, going through high school. I wish I knew how important your feet were in relation to your hips, in relation to your ability to turn, to
Yeah.
your shoulders, to your neck, how cupping therapy works. Like, there is so much that is involved within the human body that we can do to manipulate it and get results that we're looking for. And I just don't think that there is enough out there. So that's why, having this on a weekly basis, being able to have conversations with people like yourself is so rewarding. And I hope that, for those who are listening, that they're getting that value and sharing it with others. If there are people who aren't necessarily listening yet, I think it's important, and that's what we're bringing to the table here. But let's dive into, because prior to COVID, things, you and I and the AAP team, we met up, we did some drills, we did some cupping. So we've got some video that we're going to be sharing on our YouTube channel. Actually, as soon as this episode is live, you should go check out to our YouTube channel and check out the episode on feet that Ian Singleton put together, our videographer. But let's go into how important that mobility is for athletes and that aspect, because so many people are like, I went and worked out, I did my bench press, I did my squats, did my deadlifts, my
Yeah.
resistance training's covered, but they neglect the mobility, they neglect the warming up, the cool downs. Like, how important is all of that?
Okay. Great question. Great question. That's something that, man, it's like one of the most important things to get into our heads, especially as athletes, even as people. Like even
Mm-hmm.
outside of just the athletes, like people need to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Mobility, from what I've learned, has nothing to do. It does, but it doesn't with muscle. Mobility, we're talking more so about joint range of motion and your body's capacity to actually own those ranges.
Okay.
That's what mobility should be. Now, if we're talking about motility, maybe the pliability of tissue, then that's one other thing. How pliable is the muscle? Is it actually moving? Have you ever heard of this book, The Supple Leopard, by Kelly
No.
Starrett?
No.
Check that out. Kelly Starrett
Okay.
writes an awesome textbook. It's huge. It's like a manifesto of like everything to do with mobility, how to stretch effectively and use different things like bands and rollers and all this kind of stuff. Because that stuff is like super important. But people think of stretching a tissue or stretching a muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and it is found that not a lot of actual change happens when it comes to actually stretching a muscle, especially when you're doing it statically.
Mm.
So statically, really obviously, holding a stretch for 30 seconds. Now that stuff is great for at the end of your workout. If you want to kind of lengthen the tissue because you've been using it to contract the whole time, it's great to
Mm-hmm.
lengthen it. But static stretches do not change performance or address performance in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of different studies for that. I'd love to find more of those studies so I can share those with you. But like this is just
Mm-hmm.
what I've learned throughout the years.
Sure.
Now that I've been focusing on my joint health, the muscles just follow almost every single time. You know
Mm.
what I mean? So it's like if your joints are in proper position, why would the muscles be out of position, right? Because muscles
Totally.
follow the joints, right? And we never focus on, most people never, I never knew the idea that the joint has to be pulled out slightly, and that's, we call that traction. And like
Okay.
every therapist does it. It's like we do it to, therapists do it to their clients, but then athletes don't learn traction and like the basics of how to mobilize themselves,
Hmm.
right? Like most stretches happen in fascia. Like
Right.
another big percentage of the stretch, I think, is around, don't quote me on this, maybe 30 to 45% of the stretch happens in the joint.
Wow.
So then you're talking about another small percentage happening within maybe the tendons and like whatever, but then another very small percentage of stretch actually happens in the muscle.
Mm.
So it's like, what are we doing? Why are
Yeah.
we sitting there stretching for an hour when it's like, well, maybe you might actually be making a structure or the joint compromised or actually a little bit weaker because you're stretching out an area that needs stability. And that's why the body's tightening it up, because it's like, yo, this joint is out of position. So I'm gonna like tighten up here for you. I'm gonna tighten up here for you. And then we go get it massaged or we go stretch it out. It's like, well, that might actually make it worse.
Mm.
right? So
Yeah,
sometimes
it's
mobility,
temporary relief.
yeah. So I think, in my opinion, from my studies and what I've ever done and what works for me in my practice for 4 years of doing, 5 years of doing actual physical manual labor or physical therapy, is like mobility works on here, and then stability is hand in hand.
Mm.
Mobility and stability, they do not, you can't just be a mobile person, because your nervous system depends on stability. It needs it,
Gotcha.
right? And if it doesn't have that stability, then it's going to lock the mobility for you.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you need the two, right? So
Yeah.
you need, for example, in the shoulder, I'll give you a small example. In the scapula, we need scapular stability,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the scapula is right back here. It's the it's,
Mm-hmm.
it's the glenohumeral, or sorry, the scapular joint. It needs to be stable. That's where all of our bench presses come from. That's where all of our lat pull downs. We have to have a stable shoulder. But right beside it, we need glenohumeral mobility, which is the capacity for the ball and socket to actually do the rotation. And if you're
Right.
limited in range of motion, it's probably going to also affect the stability because you're not stable in the right position. So you need both,
Right.
right? And that's where the education comes from. That's where, like, you can't just show somebody how to stretch. It's like, okay, well, how are they stable? Are they in the right position? There's so much when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm excited for us to be able to share in some of the upcoming stuff that we're going to be sharing on our YouTube channel. I mean, the foot episode will come out today.
Nice.
We'll start doing some other stuff in the next couple weeks and months to follow. And, I think that's one of the cool parts. Once things start to open up again, we'll do some follow up, see the progress from when we originally did it to where we're at now. See if, I couldn't even get down into a full squat, right? Like my mobility was weak. But that's something that I've been, addressing slowly
Yeah.
but surely, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
comes. I'm not exactly the most patient person ever, so it's just baby steps. But did you see the guy? There was a video yesterday that got shared around on YouTube. This guy's bench pressing 1,121 pounds. Did you see this?
No.
Okay, so Jordan's gonna pull it up. This guy, as we'll see shortly, literally drops 1,100 pounds as we're watching here.
Oh, he drops it.
Well, oh yeah, get ready. Let's watch the
Oh
reactions here.
no. Oh no.
Oh. Let's watch that again one more time. It's a quick little
Oh, you're
little
gonna put me through this
5
again?
seconds.
Oh
Yeah, yeah,
man.
yeah. Oh, here we go. Full screen.
Oh, thank.
1,121 pounds, just right on the old sternum. Lift
Is this
off.
guy okay? Like,
He's fine.
oh, he's fine. Okay, good. Now I can enjoy it. All right.
Oh, there's 6 guys holding up 1,100 plus pounds, and that guy drops it straight on his sternum.
Bro, I just felt
So,
that.
so I had to bring that up. It was crazy. But that
Okay.
guy is fine. No injuries whatsoever. He actually followed up in a comment and was like, yeah, I'm built like a god, so I don't know what happened. But like
Sure.
crazy. Any other human being's dead,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about, after watching that, how should people, the average human, for instance, train? Because I think
Mm.
a lot of us get caught up, myself included, in, you know what, I want to push more weight, I want to get bigger, I want to get stronger. You went through that, we talked about, you're wanting to press as much weight as you possibly can, be huge upper body traps so that you have no neck, right? Like, guys get into, and guys especially, males, were trying to, for whatever reason it is, whether you're insecure about your body originally, you're trying to impress females, whatever the case, but it happens. And in society, you want to be this big, huge upper body guy that looks good with his shirt off at the beach,
Yeah. Yeah.
when, you maybe aren't necessarily addressing real health and lifestyle opportunities that are available for you.
Right. Right.
So let's, what are your thoughts on that? How would you suggest that people, the average person, trains for health, long term, and longevity?
Oh man, another great question. So I'm big on that. Like, I'm massive on the idea that whatever you're doing, your training should be for that thing.
Mm.
So if you're, let's say you don't, let's say you just go for walks every day, right? Like a like a bench press is not going to help with that, right? Like,
Hmm.
for example, a basketball player. When I was a basketball, like when I played basketball, like I was doing bench press. Go try shooting hoops after doing bench press. Like it's next to impossible. You have to, like, oh, it takes so long for that stuff to come back and that mobility to come back. It's like, what am I doing? Like, when
Hmm.
in basketball am I ever doing this motion?
When in any sport are you doing that more motion?
In life, when have you ever done this? and lifted something over your head. I mean, maybe drywall when I used to do construction. I do some
Yeah, there you
drywall
go.
work, but that's even holding it up. It's not actually pressing and controlling and pressing. I've learned that our working out is like we work out as if we are machines.
Mm,
And our bodies are not machines. We are not mechanical things. That's even though that science tried to drill that into us. I'm a kind of a spiritual person where I don't believe things are just mechanical. There's also so many other things when it comes to that. However, when it comes to movement, like what makes a human move really well and why humans move very well is our capacity to run fast. That's how we used to hunt animals, right? That's
mhm.
and then climbing. Like how many people do you know climb anything? Like not no climbing
Nah.
happens.
Yeah.
So none. That's why we can't drop into a squat. Squatting was the original movement to clean ourselves. To it's actually one of the best ways to pass a stool. It's the
Mhm.
best way to pass a stool. If you don't believe me, try it. It's disgusting, true.
Everyone's backyard's gonna be dirty.
I'm like, that's funny.
Yeah.
But like that right because it actually changes the colon and actually like it actually is the way you're supposed to. That's why so many people get hernias. That's why so many people get issues when they're going to the on the toilet and they push so hard and then something pops out the back of their lower back because you're not supposed to be sitting in that position and pushing so hard. And
Mm,
some people get hemorrhoids because they're in that same position, which is in a deep squat, and they're pushing because there's actually a way that's locking the intestines. It's actually locking the colon when you sit in that toilet position. That's a fact, by
crazy.
the way. So when I sit on the toilet, sometimes I have my what I got my parents is this little stepper thing that you can put in front of the toilet and you put your
Hmm.
feet on it so it elevates your knees a little bit. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, it'll be fluid.
No problems, eh?
No
No
problem.
issues.
I know people with hemorrhoid issues, so many issues, and it's just because of the amount of pushing they're doing. Now, you can talk about food and like what causes that, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
But when it comes to bench press and all this stuff, like those workouts, the bodybuilding style workouts, never worked for me in football or basketball or anything I ever did. Even dance moves, like and nothing, and that helped me in nothing. I just thought it was working because that's just what everybody else was doing.
Right.
But now I'm noticing like somebody like functional patterns, for example. Really check that his page out. Or I've done like two of his courses already. His name is
Okay.
Nadi Aguilar, Naudi, Nadi, and
Okay.
Aguilar is his last name. Functional patterns. So he really harps on like rotation. And there's
Mm,
a lot of forces that are coming from the front side to the back side, but while you're taking a step back, or vice
right.
versa, right?
Hmm.
Because that's the force vector of what you're doing in time and space is actual movement and actual rotation. And that's how we move is through rotation. That's how we
Hmm.
run, that's how we walk, that's how we throw. That's what our bodies are built to do is run, throw, and walk and climb. But then we go to the gym and we do these mechanical machines. We adjust our bodies to these machines and we think that we're doing something. No wonder we're getting joints that are painful, numbness in the hands or whatever it is, because the body's in this weird position. Then you're adding load to it. It's just unnatural. It's unnatural.
Yeah.
I call it the junk food of exercise, which is like the bodybuilder style for people that aren't bodybuilding. I'm not talking anything against bodybuilding at all. Like
Hmm.
I like if you're that's what you're trying to do, like powerlifting, bodybuilding, then do that for that purpose.
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna do powerlifting movements, then you're doing it for powerlifting. Like powerlifting stuff won't help you on a soccer field,
Yeah.
right?
If your goals are for performance in your specific sport, then you should be training for that specific sport. If your goals are to be good looking aesthetically, then you
Yeah,
sure bench press, shoulder press are going to be great for you to build muscle and maybe build a nice physique.
yeah,
But in the grand schemes, from performance standpoint, it's probably not going to be helping you much.
definitely.
Totally agree with you on that one. Do you also? I'm curious from your standpoint because you having played sports now know how competitive it is even to get into a McMaster football, for instance. There's a gentleman on Manchester City who just signed $100 million contract. I don't know if you're a Premier League guy watching soccer. I was watching some last night for the first time ever,
Yeah.
and I don't. So I'm getting into soccer. You know, I host the Athletes podcast. I should know this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But
Totally.
this guy signed $100 million contract with no agent. Strictly did it using data. So he hired a third party outsourced company to come in and identify his previous work, his current work, and what his future potential is going to look like. And
Yeah.
then was able to negotiate his contract through that. Pretty damn
Wow.
incredible. 29-year-old midfielder. What's his name? Is it up at the top? Yeah, Kevin De Bruyne. So he signed a 30% increase on his deal. $100 million contract with Man City strictly from the use of data.
Awesome.
So incredible. Thank you, Jordan, for pulling that up. But I wanted to also bring that up because I think it's so important, the fact that athletes recognize now, and to your point, is that we are learning and athletes are so much smarter than they used to be. And
Yep.
there are so many other opportunities available, whether it's through social media, whether it's through your own research, whether it's through trial and error on your own body, where athletes can use the knowledge that they have and apply it to their specific sport, performance, etc. So for you, how do you see the next kind of 5-10 years looking within athletics because of how much research is going on, because of how many opportunities are available? Where do you see athletics going and there being a real opportunity for the next generation to apply this knowledge?
Another loaded question, dude.
I know, that's all I ask.
Wow. Well, I like to look at it like this. I followed LeBron James throughout his career,
Hmm.
and where LeBron is now and what he's doing with like schools and communities and stuff, he's showing that athletes can be leaders of our communities.
Mm.
Athletes can be that's why I believe I'm a leader, because I stepped up in those times where nobody else wanted to step up in that game. And I proved to myself, and that's what sports are. It's like a self thing, really. Like you might be
Hmm.
doing it for your team, but you're really doing it kind of for yourself, like to
Totally.
grow as an individual, to grow as an athlete, to grow as whatever. So I truly believe that's why I love this podcast. That's why I really want to talk to athletes, because like um, I thought that being an athlete meant that I wasn't doing well in school as well. Like those
Mm.
things probably go hand in hand. Like if you're a jock, then you don't have to do so well in school. So I didn't
Hmm.
apply myself in high school that well in terms of the studies, because I thought maybe sports will just take me there anyways. Because what you hear in college is, if you get there, they'll just like help you with the marks and well, whatever it is. It just sounds like an easy road. So we give athletes this excuse to just have it kind of easy,
Hmm.
right? I've learned that through my culture too. And now, after I got injured, man, I became like a nerd. Like
Yeah.
I was watching like 6 hour lectures on quantum physics. Like I was like, what? Like, why would I be doing this? And then I was like learning about like ancient civilizations and like the connection of all things. And I was like obsessed with just learning about things, which led me into being like, okay, why was I so good at sports? And like, how can that leadership translate into real life things? Whether
Mm.
it's finance, whether it's learning about the stock market, whether it's learning about all these different other aspects. But because we were successful as athletes, I truly believe that success should translate in every part of the world. Even if you were injured devastatingly and you lost everything, man, the fact that you made it, the fact that you got to that level means you could do that in anything. This is a society that tells you that you're in a box. You know what I mean? We live in
Totally.
a box, we sleep in a box, we eat in a box cereal, get in a box car, go to the box job, box, 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 everything's box, but that's not who we are. You
Hmm.
can't put a person in a box. So as an athlete, you should be able to translate that and move on and like take that into your relationship and be the leader in your relationship, be a leader in your family, be a leader in your this. And like I believe athletes are the future of that because we've shown it through our
Yeah.
sport.
Damn, what an answer. That was good. I liked it. I didn't know what you were going to come up with, but that was pretty legit. Um, I see. This is why building relationships like this are so important, and I'm excited for 5-10 years down the road where you and I are and what we're doing moving forward, because it's going to be pretty damn incredible, especially when you bring that amount of energy and passion that you have to the table, in specifically applying what you want to do. So let's talk about what you want to do. First, that being the podcast. I'm excited to help you along with that process, get you on the go with that, but also with kind of what your end goal is as far as the retreat is concerned over in Fort Erie. And
Nice.
let's dive into both those, because I think that's so important. They go hand in hand and it's going to help a heck of a lot of people.
So the podcast I wanted, because I work out of a gym in Welland called Top Dogs. Top Dog
Mhm.
Fitness has new management. They are trying to stay open during COVID, and that's like a struggle in itself because of memberships, right? So what I wanted to do with outside of COVID was create, for example, this is my idea. I've never said it to a lot of people, but like a walk-in clinic for people that just have injuries or just want to come in for advice. You don't have to pay $85 to go get an hour treatment, but then like you just kind of learn how to fish. You don't really want the fish. It's okay. Like I can get the fish from YouTube. Like just teach me how to do these things on my own. So
Mhm.
that's something that I really believe in, because I really believe to empower the individual. Because when you have the power, you don't depend on anybody. You don't depend on anything. You could do it yourself with the right knowledge, obviously.
Mhm.
Right. So what I want to do is the podcast. But now remember, for me, the body isn't just the body physically. right? The body is also the mind, the spirit, your energy, your emotions, like all these things. As an athlete, you have to have these things in check. And those athletes that have those things in check, we see them. They're the best of the best. Like look at Luka Doncic, man. Like Luka
Yeah,
Doncic,
guy's
22.
ridiculous. You see
Yesterday, you
that
saw
shot he
that?
hit last night?
Dude,
Jordan,
it's
can you
ridiculous.
pull that up? Jordan's getting a workout in today. Luka Doncic hit a ridiculous shot yesterday,
It
three-pointer
reminds
to
me
win
of
the game.
Jamie from the Rogan podcast. That's
Oh,
Jamie
oh
put
yeah.
up.
Jordan's that we're working on it. He's becoming it. I'm grooming him into it, slowly.
Nice.
Luka Doncic, I guess that would have
Yo,
been what, April 14th?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see
22
that?
years old. 22 years
Yeah.
old. He's been playing pro at a young age, and then all of a sudden, he didn't have to be a 30-year-old to be this great. Whatever. He's doing it now.
Yeah. And why do you
Well,
think that is?
oh, when you start early, and like Kobe Bryant, for example, he started playing with pros at the age of 11 or something like that.
Yeah,
So when
yeah.
you're exposed to like the next level as an athlete, you're that's how your brain's gonna look at things. You're gonna, oh, that's what I have to get good at. You have a
Yeah,
different spectrum
totally.
who you kind of compare yourself to.
Well, it's perspective, right? Like I
Yeah.
didn't know the stuff I know now prior to having conversations. Like, what are we, 79 episodes in on the Athletes podcast? I didn't know a quarter of the shit I knew previously. And now I'm getting exposed to all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, wow, I have way more knowledge and perspective on
Oh
things
man.
when,
Oh,
and that's what they're learning at such a young age so that they can bring that from 11 years old. And once they get to the NBA at 18, which is what Kobe did, like, it's no big deal. He's been playing against these guys for 7 years, right?
yeah.
Anyway, let's watch this shot by Luka Doncic. Absolutely ridiculous three-pointer to end the game. Buzzer beater. Who were they? They were playing Memphis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank God for
I,
our
lo-
slow
I love
Wi-Fi.
John Morant too, but this guy's ridiculous.
Jaw is, look at this, ready. Inbound pass here to Luka. Slips one defender, throws it up, bang. And he's crazy. He's falling after that shot, and he's literally almost under the rim as the ball goes in. He was like, just threw up a prayer, a little H&P plan, hope and pray.
And
Wins the
you know
game.
what, man? I've learned about when you're so good at what you do, like somebody like Kobe, Luca, all these guys, they're not thinking anymore.
Mm.
So in my spiritual background, where I come from with all this, like that's like the infinity of all things allowing to express itself when you let your ego get out of the way.
Mm.
And that, bro, that's what Kobe says about flow states.
Yeah.
Right? Flow state is you literally doing something 1,001 times so that you don't have to think about it. So when you're playing your game, you can allow that godliness, that thing, that essence come through you and channel through you. And that's why we see these amazing things happen. Because like, I could never do that even if I tried. Like even if I
Yeah.
tried doing that, oh, you'll probably miss most of them because you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a
Jeff.
routine, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like when you have a routine on the free throw line, those that have a really good routine, Jason Kidd kisses his wife, Ray Allen has his certain thing, Steve Nash has his certain things. Like everybody has their own routine, but I could never develop a routine because I was so lazy in my normal life. Like I
Mm.
didn't make my bed in the morning. I didn't have a good routine to go to bed. I didn't have a good routine in the morning, so it translated into my sport.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so if I develop now that I'm translating, now that I'm actually making routines in my sport, like now my shot is really consistent because I have a certain routine for it. Now all of a sudden I'm also translating that into like making my bed every morning and like doing all these other routines. And I'm realizing how routines aren't something that locks us into something negative, but it frees us up to allow the infinity to express itself when you have the boundaries and the parameters of the fundamentals down pat.
Quote clip. That's gonna be like so good. Jeff Olson, who was the previous guest on the Athletes podcast, talked about, he was a downhill skier, for instance. So he's going ripping downhill. He's like, you can't be thinking when you are ripping at 80 kilometers, 80 miles per
Yeah.
hour going downhill.
Yeah.
You're dead, right? Like, so what's important is getting those reps in, like you said, putting thousands of shots up, whatever sport it is you're doing, whatever you're performing at, you need to put in the time. Once you put in the time in, time again, eventually the results will come. It's like doing this podcast, man. Like for us, every single episode gets a little bit better. I get a bit better at talking. The guests get a bit better. You've got more energy today than I do. Like all of this stuff slowly comes together, but you need to lay the foundation for it to be able to occur. Love it. You hit that nail on the head. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I can go off about that stuff because that to me, like even right now, if I thought about what I should say and planned it and wrote it down and had all these things ready, and oh, that's a gem. I'm gonna say that. Oh, that's a dude. I would be like paralyzed. I'd be
Yeah.
absolutely paralyzed. But I've come to this point in my life now where like my thinking, my doing, and my saying are in line now. Right? So now
Mm.
I don't have to lie. I don't have to do anything. It's just like it's just the same consciousness shooting out. I can just speak my truth, and
Yeah.
that's dangerous to a lot of people. It's just to be honest about things, honestly.
Totally. Well, and you and I are both fans of Gary Vaynerchuk and kind of the
Oh,
energy that he provides and
yeah,
his who gives a shit mentality that he
yeah,
brings to the table.
yeah.
So I'm trying to swear slightly less on this
I
show,
know.
but it's
I know.
sometimes necessary to get the point across, like Gary says, right?
Yeah.
Um, but how do you get to that point? How did you become comfortable being in that flow state and not worrying about what other people think or you know the judgment that comes from that? Because that is something that people are dying from right now is that fear of what someone else is going to think about what you're doing, about the fact that you're on the athletes podcast about XYZ, that you got an extra roll of fat on your skin, like whatever it is. People are stuck in high school, man. Like Gary says, it's you can't be caught up in what other people think about you. There are 7.8 billion people on this earth. Like I said, the fact that one person doesn't like the blue shirt that you're wearing should not matter to you at all. Yet, a lot of people succumb to the fact that, oh, I don't like that shirt, so I'm going to feel self-conscious and I'm not going to wear it and I'm not going to do my hair like that because she doesn't like that. Like,
Mm,
oh, it's
yeah.
exhausting, man.
Yes. Yes. It's
Right?
absolutely exhausting. It's draining. It takes everything out of you. It dims your light. It makes your infinity into a finite thing. Is that the end of the question? Because I can go off about that. That's
Go, 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 go.
okay.
Yeah.
So, dude, when I say this, when I said about the whole, like, I believe in this 10,000 hours of meaningful thinking for every like hour of meaningful work. Like it's maybe not 10,000, but maybe 100 hours of meaningful thinking for every hour of meaningful work. Let's just say that.
Okay.
But if you think of even as an athlete, what would like a Kobe or somebody like that, when you think of their training, do you think that they're like they have crowds and people watching them and they're trying to impress people while they're training?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. So these guys spend hours and hours and hours of being alone, right? You as an
Mm-hmm.
athlete, I'm sure you've spent hours and hours, more hours alone than you have at your craft, than you have impressing people at the game,
100%.
right? So that your to answer your question is like, man, I love this thing by Alan Watts. Alan Watts is somebody that really helped me understand my inner world. He's this philosopher that died in this, I think, the 70s or something like that. But he says
Mm-hmm.
this. He goes, imagine a centipede wakes up in the morning and has to think about every single leg and how to turn those circuits on and get those to operate. He would never get done.
Yeah.
He would literally be paralyzed trying to turn on each circuit, right? So just like the centipede doesn't understand how to turn on and move his leg, he just does it. That's the same type of energy you have to get to in terms of like a flow state. Like that's kind of like a philosophical idea, but at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, like where I'm getting at is the idea that isolation is how I got to where I'm at now. And it's
Mm.
not easy. It's not easy. It's 10,000 hours of me like I spent the last decade knowing that I was going to be the person that I am right now. I knew that I wanted to not care about people. I knew that I wanted to voice my opinion. I knew that I didn't see a lot of leaders that were actually being genuine in my
Mm.
communities. So I had to learn how to be genuine. Then I had to learn how to like have my own moral compass, my own morality, my own spirituality. I think it's a bigger picture. Anybody that you see, like Phil Jackson, bro, that's why the Lakers were the Lakers.
Yeah.
Because Phil Jackson brought in yoga, he brought in meditation. Then
Yeah.
Kobe all of a sudden went from the ego trying to like show off his stuff, be the kid, to like this calculated, meditated, cannot shake him, cannot move him type of mentality. We call it
Mm-hmm.
Mamba mentality. We label it. We put it in this thing, and people wear it on their shirts, and then they're like, they don't actually concentrate on a lot of things. Their minds are so scattered, especially
Mm-hmm.
nowadays with ADD and like our addictions to like flash forwards and all these different things. It's like, man, what happened to like hyper focus?
Mm-hmm.
Hyper focus is like when your whole being is into one thing,
Yeah.
right? And like if you're an athlete, if you're a basketball player, I used to sleep with my basketball like beside me. Like if it was raining outside, that's what young people right now. Like I have a nephew, he's amazing at soccer, but like COVID, he's like, oh, I haven't trained in like maybe a week or two. I'm like, what? Like, dude, if COVID hit when I was an athlete, I'm sure you're the same, Dave. Like,
Yeah.
or anybody on the podcast, like, man, if it's raining out, I still played in the rain.
Yeah.
Like I sprained my ankle one time because I was playing in the snow one time. How do you play basketball in the snow? You can't. But I did it anyways because I was obsessed.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it's more so like I've been obsessed with inner growth.
Mm.
Obsessed. Like when I say that, man, like 10 years ago when I went through that thing and I thought it was gonna like defeat me, and that person died, and the old Jimmy died, then I'm like, okay, then how can I recreate myself? Right. And I say this on my like I have another podcast. It's not just about the body, it's about like the mind, the soul, and all this other stuff too. And I
Mm-hmm.
say this, I go, when you recreate yourself and
Mm-hmm.
that person, you just start deciding who you want to be in the future. So then you're like, okay, what habits do I need to bring in? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what am I consuming? Because consuming is not food only.
Oh,
We
it's
think that,
everything.
oh, dude, it's like, do you listen to Gary Vaynerchuk or do you listen to Kardashians? Do
Yep.
you like, do you know what I mean? Like, who are your top 5 people you speak to most on a regular basis? That's
Yeah.
who you
What
want.
music are you listening to? Like it's everything, right? Like, and that dictates your mood. The food you're consuming is one thing. That's going to make you feel shitty if it's not good food. The music that you're listening to can dictate how you're going to feel.
Yeah,
What you watch on YouTube, who you follow on Instagram, it is
yeah.
all
Well,
having an effect on your body.
which leads me to the concept of like the inner voice, the thoughts that you have about yourself is the thing you have to change the most in life.
Yeah.
The way you feel about yourself is literally the only thing you ever have to overcome in life in general. People think it's the external world. It's you. You are your own enemy, your own devil, your own God. You are that. The religions have always tried to say that in
Yeah.
different ways. Every religion, whether it's Buddhism, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, all of them say something about the human inside. When you have control of that, you tame that demon, the ego being the devil, telling you about the past and the future, not letting you live in the moment. That's what the devil is. The devil makes you
Yeah.
remind you of the past, or reminds you of some worry that you have in the future. But where do you find God? Where do you find the universe? Where do you find consciousness? It's here right now, always. So when I learned that right here, right now, I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle back when I was
Mm-hmm.
like 19 years old. And that, dude, that was the first time I understood what spirituality meant. And I'm like, how do I like pray towards something, or how do I do? I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing it right here. The moment right here helps me the most. And that's the only right now is the only thing you ever experience if you think about it. Like even if
Mm-hmm.
you think about tomorrow, you'll experience tomorrow when it gets here. You'll
Yeah.
experience it as now.
The power of presence is crazy. It's
And that's why
crazy.
that's why you felt me when I saw you the other day. That's why you're feeling me now, because of like my presence. Like I'm not thinking about nowhere else. I'm not thinking about anywhere else. The entire universe is happening right here in this room right now.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. Jay, we could be chatting for hours on end. I want to first of all say thank you for coming on the Athletes Podcast. The way we wrap up every episode is we ask the individual guest what their biggest piece of advice for the next generation of athletes would be. I'd love, with your perspective, with your knowledge, and your humble ability to get across a message with such passion, I'd love for you to give your biggest piece of advice.
There's a lot of avenues. There's a lot of different it depends on how deep. Like if we're talking about COVID, we're talking about this. But what I seen the other day, for example, man, I was playing basketball. And I'm a 30-year-old guy playing ball at the park, just shooting hoops, right? And I noticed these like 3 of these like 10-year-old girls were there, and all they were doing, their phone was out, and they were like doing these dances and like shaking their butts and doing all these things. Like 10 years, I'm like, what? Like the courts, like the playground's over there, and the court's like right here, and I'm like, what is happening? And they said something because I kicked some box or something. I'm like, what is going on? Like the point of what I'm saying is that just this generation just wants to like document things more than they actually want to do the thing.
Mm.
You know, most people want to like show the world what they're doing, and they're not actually having any fun. You know,
Mm.
like when I used to go with my girlfriend, like man, when I first met her, she was like, let's go here, let's go here. We should do these things. It was more about taking the photo, less about having any fun. I'm like, yo, we're in Mexico. What are you worried about? What are you worried about this? What are you worried about this? Bro, we're in Mexico. Let's just have fun right now. Who cares how the photo took? Who cares? My generation never cared about photos. If anything, my generation, I don't like talking about generations too much, but my generation is like, we wanted to enjoy ourselves in that moment. And we honestly didn't even want people to take pictures because we just wanted to have fun.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So this
Yeah.
generation is so obsessed with the image of having fun, and they're not having any fun. You know, we want to outsource our passion into video games, which I have every single video game you can imagine. I have them all. But I know that I'm using it now. It's not using me. Like, I don't have to outsource who I am to this thing that's making me valid. It's making me feel validated. It's like a junk food version of real validation. You know what I mean? So like, we should be seeking, the next generation should be seeking truth, like actual real experience. Human experience is life. It's not seeing it through a screen. It's not feeling it through a song. It's not like, oh, meeting the right type of movie star. That's not going to bring you anything. If you love the person you love, bruh, nobody can shake you. Nobody can stop you, because it doesn't matter what they say about you, because you've already even said it to yourself. You're already cool with it. You felt it. That's why I believe you should dive into your demons and face your fears. Fear right now is my compass. Remember that, bro. Fear right now is my compass. Like, now I sit in bed and I meditate and I'm like, what am I afraid of the most? Oh, my family judging me for doing this thing. Then go towards that.
Yeah.
Go towards that thing, because on the other side of fear, Will Smith said this the most, is the best version of who you are. Right on the other side of it.
Boom. What a way. Jay, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy. You are the man. I'm excited for what we have in store here. We're going to have a lot of fun moving forward. Again, I appreciate you sincerely for coming on the Athletes Podcast. We're looking forward to more in the future.
Dude, thanks for trusting me. Thanks for listening. And thanks for everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for watching the 79th episode of the Athletes Podcast, featuring the real biomechanic. Jay is just an energetic, enthusiastic individual. Loved having him on the show. I hope you guys gained value in some of the topics that we brought up, as well as training tips. We got more to come. We're going to be doing lots with Jay in the future. Look forward to it. Thank you again for watching. If you enjoyed it, and even if you didn't, hit that subscribe, like button. Do what you got to do. We appreciate it on the Athletes Podcast. My name is David Stark. I'm your host. Jordan Maslin is our producer. Ian Singleton is our videographer. And that was the 79th episode of the Athletes Podcast. Thanks for watching. See ya later.